Shalom. Welcome to the Messianic Hour with Rabbi Scott Sekulow. The Messianic Hour is a program designed to give you insight into the Jewish roots of your faith. Rabbi Scott is also here to answer your questions and help you gain a deeper understanding of Bible prophecy. And now, here's your host, Rabbi Scott Sekulow.
Shalom and welcome to another edition of the Messianic Hour. I'm your host, Rabbi Scott. I'm here with my wife, Judy. This show is dedicated to reaching the lost and educating the found. And we bring to you each week the scripture from a both Jewish and Gentile perspective to understand the Jewish roots of our faith in God and through our Messiah, Yeshua. And we are glad that you are joining us this week. You might be listening to us on the radio or on over 75 stations throughout the U.S. You might be listening in through the internet. We're on several different stations there as well. Also, we have our iPad, our Android, and our Apple. What I'm looking for. Thank you, apps. And so you can join us there as well as Facebook and YouTube and Vimeo and all the other social networks to join us in, so you can not only listen, but you can actually view us as well. And of course, we have the Messianic channel on the Roku box, so check that out as we give you great information, a lot more as well. You have our teaching from our weekly Shabbat services at Congregation Beth Adonai and our sermons. So we have a lot of ways to really let people know what's going on in the scripture.
4 ways to expand that.
Right.
There's, you come up with ideas that you like to throw out every once in a while.
So did that one this morning.
Yes, you did. So we'll see what happens with that. And, if there's anybody out there who knows like a local radio station that's looking for some free programming, let us know. We'll send it out there. Any way that you can help us, help everybody else by getting the word out on, what we hope is very biblically solid teachings.
And that's really what we try to do. We don't get super spiritual. We don't try to read a lot into the scripture. I know there's a lot of people, ministries out there that do that and kind of super, spiritualize the word. And we just really want to look at the word and get a deeper understanding, and then watch as really God opens it up and lets us understand what's going on. And I'm excited this week's Torah portion that we'll be studying is with the Exodus and them going out of Egypt and the different events that are taking place. And we're really going to see our Messiah in that. But Judy, while this is all going on, the word is still being brought to us today, and we still see things going that were prophesied in the Bible that are happening today. In the news right now, we'll talk about this a little bit more in the second half of the show, is what's going on with Israel and the Palestinians. They're trying to make a peace treaty. Now other governments are trying to say if Israel doesn't do this, that they're going to boycott Israel. And I hate to tell them, if you want to mess with Israel, you're messing with God, and that's going to be a real big problem. You don't want to mess with God's people. And when you do, guess who gets hurt? It's not going to be Israel. It's going to be those who go against God. The scripture is very clear. I will bless those who bless my people, and I will curse those who curse my people. And we're going to be looking at that. And even a company in the news, SodaStream, has made news recently because they not only produce the product in Israel, but their labor force is made up of both Israelis and Arabs. We're going to talk about that in the second half of the show. So stay tuned. We'll be back right after this break.
That's just the way it is.
Welcome to the Messianic Hour. I'm Judy Sekulow, and
all right, we were having fun during the break because I can't sing, and I started doing that. And Joe, our producer, just happened to pull that in, and it was great. So we're using that as bumper music, but that is just the way it is. And so we're going to be looking right now at the way it was, which was at the time of the Exodus.
That's right. Will you stop? We're doing Exodus 13 through 17, and we're going to look at 3 aspects. We're going to look at the Mikveh, baptism, the rock, and the manna, and we'll see what we actually get to make it through this week. But we're going to kind of center in on 2 passages that speak to this that's found in the Brit Hadashah. And The first is 1 Corinthians, which speaks about the crossing of the sea and water from the rock. And then we see, when we get to the manna, we're going to see that Yeshua himself alludes to manna, giving us a revelation of himself in John chapter 6. So that's going to kind of form our outline. But why don't you give us a start here with the mikveh?
Well, to look at this mikveh, what we call a water immersion, what is modern day is called baptism, we really got to go back to Cecil B. DeMille's story of the Ten Commandments and of Moses and the Israelites going through the Red Sea, because it's really a important picture for us to understand. The mikveh is a water immersion, but yet when the Israelites go through the Jordan, they go through dry. Mm-hmm. And really, so the mikveh isn't necessarily it's really a mikveh into Moses and into God's plan and purpose.
And what we see from this is when you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10 with Rabbi Shaul, he's teaching, and again, this is what we talk about, needing to take things back to context, and that he's teaching kind of in a midrash style, and that's where it's a sermon, and it's not always to be taken literally.
Right.
And he's preaching this sermon to basically believers that have become complacent, and he's exhorting them in the area of their morality. And in essence, he's teaching them that just because a person appears to be a part of the people of God, it doesn't mean he is. Appearances don't mean anything. What lies in the heart. So when he uses this word type, it's meaning an original, a pattern, an image, a copy, and it's a word that the rabbis used often. And when he uses this, and again, this is one thing that we've talked about before, is that rabbis would not quote whole chapters and verses. That's why some people get all messed up with Paul,
right,
because he doesn't go back and quote the entire Torah or whatever, but he'll use a word. And back then, we have to remember, people didn't have iPads, they didn't have tablets, they didn't have Bibles, they didn't have references where you go, where is that verse?
They had their mind and they memorized it.
Right, they memorized it. So when they used a word, people would automatically know what that passage is.
Exactly. Very important point.
And that's a lot of what Paul did. And when he used this word type, people had an exact understanding of what was going on.
Right. And so when we see this, we have to understand that Paul's main point was really show us a critically important point about the history when we read the Torah, and particularly the history of Israel after they left Egypt. His point is that God intended just about every event to teach us something about himself and how to properly relate to both him and the rest of his covenant people. And that's really a key point in which he's really trying to bring through.
Well, and Paul's doing the same thing by using this word, by alluding to a few events of the history of Israel that's in the Torah. He's meaning us to understand it in its entire context, not in just that context.
Right. Because literally, you have a picture of the Israelites on one side of the river, slaves, and yet on the other side, free. Just like we are, we're slaves to our sin, but after we accept Yeshua as our Messiah and our mikveh are cleansed in him, we are now without sin. We're free. We're free from the bondage of slavery.
And in using this Corinthians passage, Paul uses a type of terminology to allude to the passing of the sea, which is what's in this Torah portion in Exodus 13 through 17. And in fact, he says in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 1, "For I do not want you to be ignorant of the fact, brothers, that our forefathers were all under the cloud, and that all have passed through the sea. They were all baptized into Moshe in the cloud and in the sea." So really, like you said, what we have to keep in mind is that a mikveh was a place where one would go to immerse themselves,
right,
but they immersed themselves. It was it was
A
a
free will
voluntary
offering.
free will, voluntarily doing this, and that's the mindset that we need to keep
Right.
when we read the Brit Hadashah. It's not typical of what you see nowadays in baptisms.
Right, and there's another thing to understand too, is just like there's a deeper meaning. Remember, when at this point the Israelites have literally no weapons, they have no way of defending themselves, and yet they're about to go into the wilderness, and guess what? There are people out there that, no matter how big this group is, could have done damage and even destroyed them. So what happens? God uses this time of literally wiping out the Egyptians, and now all their weapons start washing up on shore. And now Israel's equipped with the best weapons of the day. So now they're one of the strongest armies, and it's again God equipping us. We can do nothing without God, but once we have God in us, now we can go on and take on the world.
Well, and the other thing that we really need to be aware of with the mikveh is that usually when there's many times in a person's life where in a Jewish context that they go to the mikveh,
Right.
And it's usually indicating that there's a change in status. You'll go to the mikveh before you're married. You go to the mikveh after you've had a child.
Right.
There's usually been this change in status, and as you referenced, as you just said, the Israelites were changing
In
status. They were going from being slaves to being free.
Right. And they went from being helpless to being armed with, literally putting on the full armor of God, if you want to look at it that way. They now have the ability, with God's help, to defend themselves and to go and do now what God has called them to do, which is go and take the land. Remember, that's the ultimate decision, is they're now going to be equipped to take it, and it's because of what God does before them that the nations around them literally are shivering in fear.
Well, and really for this case too, it was showing a change in status, but it was also showing identification. They were going from being slaves to now they're being called I'm God's people.
Right.
You know, those that are called by my name. So really it was an identification. And by saying they're being immersed into Moshe was their leader, so they were uniting with him. They were accepting his visions. They were accepting his goals. They were accepting his leadership as part of this also.
And Judy, we have to remember too who was there. It wasn't just all the 12 tribes. There were Gentiles there as well. And we see them coming together as a unit, one in God. Jew and Gentile coming together, same worship, same events, same things that had to be done. The Gentiles couldn't go out on the seventh day and get food. They were the same way. They had the Sabbath, and all that comes together and really shows us God's plan of bringing us all together under one law, one God, and ultimately one Messiah.
Well, and Rabbi Shaul uses this immersion or mikveh again in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, where he says, "For we were all baptized by one Spirit into one body." So again, we're showing that identification, that unification, and basically he's simply saying that the Spirit of God unified both Jewish and non-Jewish believers, and so now we identify with each other, and in this case of Rabbi Shaul, we're identifying with Messiah, which makes us all equal members of that one body.
Right. And so we have to remember what the term that you commonly hear today as baptism is a very Jewish thing. The mikveh, the water immersion, it's a cleansing, it's a spiritual rebirth. We see this, that it was used during then. The believers used it also to identify a new believer. They would be mikveh, immersed, showing that they went down a sinner. They're now up cleansed of those sins. We do that once for our salvation, but as you see in Scripture, you can do it at a mikveh anytime, because no one is perfect, and we still need to remember God's plan and God's purpose. Great point. We got through the mikveh. We'll look at the rock next week, but that's important as we understand how these point to our Messiah. We're seeing the Messiah within the Torah. Stay tuned. When we get back from this break, we'll be looking at what's going on in Israel, the upcoming peace treaties, and the possible boycott of Israel. Should we participate? We'll be back right after this. Stay tuned.
Messianic Hour, I'm Judy Seculo, and I'm glad that you're listening and watching to us. And not only did we get the giggles in the last segment, we had Rabbi playing the air guitar in this one. The things that you don't get to see behind the scenes That's around here. But one thing I wanted to just say is, and what I think makes it so interesting, I know for me personally, and what we really try to do, and hopefully everybody else is getting something out of this too, is that we really show how the Torah and the Brit Hadashah are woven together, how they're really, really, totally interconnected.
Right.
And I don't think that that's really done a whole lot around. And I just like to say that that's something that I know I find in my own studying, I find really important, is to really see these connections that if you don't understand your background, you're not going to really get what they are.
Right.
And I think that's so important because it shows that this is one unified book. It really does away with the concept of, Messiah came, so we don't need that stuff anymore. It doesn't mean anything anymore. It really shows that you got that they're interconnected, they're interrelated so much more than we could ever believe.
And Judy, it's interesting you bring that up because up in our Flowery Branch location. Matter of fact, I want to encourage our listening audience, if you're in the Atlanta area, you can now join us in not one but two locations. On Friday night, we have our congregation meeting up in Flowery Branch. We meet at the Cornerstone Assembly of God Church Friday nights at 7:30, and then Saturday morning you can join us at our main campus in Tucker, starting at 10 a.m. with our Torah study. 11 o'clock starts our service. We also live stream that service, so you can watch it live or archived as well. And we actually do two different messages. My message right now up in the Gainesville congregation is with Matthew, and here we're doing right now Romans. So, but it's really interesting to see how that all comes together. So I really want to encourage you to join in. Also, Judy,
Yes.
we're going to have the trip to Israel June 9th through the 19th. So if you want to join us, you can. We still have some seats available. It's, yes?
Go ahead.
$39.99, and that's round trip from Atlanta. If you don't live in Atlanta, we can get you either to Atlanta or New Jersey and over there, and it'll be a trip of a lifetime.
Okay, I do have to say something.
Yes.
And this is to everybody out there. If you're thinking about going, you got to go. If you have a child who is preteen age, awesome for them to go.
Yep.
This is going on. This will be Natalie, our daughter's third trip to Israel. We've been blessed to be able to take her twice before. This will be her third trip. And we were at school having school conferences.
Right.
And her social studies teacher, because they...
Yeah, she goes to, people know, she goes to a Christian school, so they actually learn the Bible and things like that.
I was getting there.
Okay.
Well, what her social studies teacher has developed his own curriculum, and what he does is he takes all the events in history and he inserts the Bible in at the points where they come in, so that the kids are really getting an integrated history Bible mix there. But they were watching a show on Jerusalem, and Natalie just didn't like some things how they showed it, and she goes up to her teacher.
Now, it was a show from the History Channel, so it was not necessarily a religious...
Right. She goes to her teacher and says, they left it out this, and they should have done this, and they should have done that. And he really likes the fact that she sits there and dialogues with him on this. And then her friends will go, when they're watching it, they'll go, were you there? And she's like, yes, I've been there. Were you there? Yes, I've been there. So she's really getting an understanding.
She goes, no, that's a Muslim location.
Yeah, we don't go there. So she's really getting this.
She's learning.
She's learning. So don't think of it as, oh, we're just going to go inside. They really pick up so much more than you know.
Yep. It's a great trip for kids and adults, and you will learn so much as well. So go to our website, or you can mail us at mail@rabbiscott.com, and we'll be glad to send you more information on that. Judy, right now there's a lot of talk going on in the news about the peace treaty, or what they're trying to once again develop the peace treaty, and the situation that's taking place is very simple, and that is that once again, the United States is trying to force Israel and other countries to have peace with the Palestinians, although the Palestinians are saying, look, we're not agreeing to this. Matter of fact, in the news recently, Israel just said that they were in agreement with Kerry on doing certain things for peace, and 3 of the 4 things the Palestinians have already said they will never accept. So it's almost a worthless set of time, but other countries are now trying to say we should boycott Israel if they don't do this, like it's going to affect Israel that way. And here's reality. Reality is when we mess with Israel, we get messed with. And a great example, I think her name is Scarlett Johansson. Johansson, thank you. She was a spokesperson for SodaStream, who is actually, we were at a store the other day and we actually looked at the box, and it's made in Israel. And a group that she also worked with, I think it's called Oxfam, was trying to tell that she should not do this because it's being manufactured in one of the quote settlements. Now, people have an idea of a settlement of people living in tents. That's not the case. We've been to a number of the different ones. There's universities and it's a thriving towns. And in this one particular settlement, there is the factory that makes the machines, SodaStream, and they employ over 500 people.
500 or 550
Palestinians, and that almost equal number of Israelis. But here's the interesting thing: they pay them the same wage, which normally the Palestinians, when they work in their own country, are only paid a couple of dollars a day. Here they're getting paid 2 to 3 times the normal amount, and they're actually thriving and they're working together. This company has in the same building a synagogue for the Jewish people and a mosque for the Muslims, so that they can both worship, and they're getting along. And here's people trying to say, oh, we need to stop this. This is a great example of what can happen when you work together and not have these issues. And, Israel is, this is what we're seeing, is this company is being blessed. And that's really the thing that we have to understand. Israel has a great economy, and we need to realize that what we get from it, that you like your smartphone, most of that research and development was done in Israel. And it's just amazing what goes on. And this idea of trying to force Israel to a peace treaty with a country that doesn't want it and is trying to still fight to destroy Israel, is that really how it should be?
Well, in fact, it's interesting to note that a group of rabbis have sent John Kerry a letter and told him, and basically have warned him to stop negotiations in order to avoid severe heavenly punishment for everyone involved.
Yeah, and
so he's been warned.
And that's the thing; it happens.
We've
seen it. The big, the snowstorm that hit Atlanta. All this was going on. What was happening over there? Kerry was trying to force Israel into these peace treaties. I'm telling you, the script, you can see it time and time again. Our good friend Bill Koenig has done a great book, Eye of the Storm. You can see where it's testimony after testimony of what happens when us or someone else tries to put pressure on Israel, what happens to us or those other countries. We need to pay attention to this. Israel is a key to God's plan. He gave all the land to Israel.
And I don't think they could have put it any better the way they said it. Basically, they told him that, your efforts amount to a declaration of war against the creator and ruler of the universe.
And in other words, don't mess with God, because he can do whatever he wants. And that's an issue that we're having. We're seeing this take place. This took place. The information about Obamacare comes out, where over 2.5 million jobs are going to be lost. This is not by chance, people. We need to pay attention to what's going on. When we bless Israel, we get blessed. When we curse Israel, we get cursed. We need to be a blessing, and the biggest blessing we can be is to bring them their Messiah and to share that. That's why this show is so important. We are broadcast in Israel. They're hearing this word, and it's because people like you who support us that continue to do that. I want to encourage you to go to our website, rabbiscott.com, Sign up for our newsletter. You get a weekly email that will come out. Gives you some great news from Israel. And you can support us right there online as well. Go to RabbiScott.com for more information. Until next week, this is Rabbi Scott
and Judy
saying shalom and pray for the peace of Jerusalem.